Hi there, it's Jacob, and I wanted to introduce you to my brand new podcast. This one is called Crossplay Conversations. I host it with two friends of the show who have appeared on episodes before, Joseph Hooper and Luke Lewis. It's a little bit different from the Left Behind Game Club in that we have topical conversations about video games. We've got 9 episodes out now with topics ranging from the past, present, and future of licensed games, the state of game publishing, and then reviews of games like Venba, Stray Gods, and more. What I'm giving you now is an unedited version of episode 9, which is a Spider-Man retrospective. In the episode, we cover Spider-Man 2018 that I just finished, Spider-Man Miles Morales, as well as a non-spoiler review of Spider-Man 2 Luke and Joseph had just finished when we recorded. I figured that this episode was actually closest in format to the Left Behind Game Club, so we're dropping it in the feed for you right now. Don't worry, the Left Behind Game Club is still going. We've got some great episodes coming soon, including a 2-part series about Final Fantasy XVI that launch on November 22nd and December 6th. And then in January, we have an episode about Until Dawn. If you love this show, give Crossplay Conversations a chance. And if you like this one, you can find it on all major podcast feeds as well as on YouTube. Without further ado, here is Crossplay Conversations. Ring ring, it's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep on the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host today, Jacob McCourt, and today I'm joined by my two co-hosts. First, the sneaker savant, Joseph Hooper.
Hello.
Do you have a shoe? Do you have a shoe?
I don't have a shoe.
Disappointing. No.
He has 10 shoes in.
The winterized Jordan 4. I don't actually like this material a lot, to be honest, but it's a cool looking shoe.
That is a cool looking shoe.
It is a cool shoe. For listeners, it's red and blue. It's got some blue on the tongue, or some red on the tongue. Cool shoe.
It's almost Spider-Man inspired.
Slightly. Very slightly.
Color scheme.
And my second friend, the host with the most, it's Luke Lewis. Hello.
All I want for Christmas is this podcast.
Wow.
Everyone.
Did you wear that shirt
November.
specifically for that joke? Because if
Absolutely.
so, well done.
Absolutely.
Well done.
I'm not
For
above
the listeners,
For
it is a
for-
Mariah Carey shirt.
It's a good shirt.
It's an excellent
Usually
shirt.
I wear it on November 1st, but I said we are recording a podcast on November 4th, so I'm wearing it today.
I love it. Well, thanks, boys, for being here today. Today we're doing a Spider-Man episode, but we're doing the thing that not many shows have done, where we have two folks on the show that have played through Spider-Man 2, and then we have one person on the show who's actually actively playing through the series from the beginning. So what we're going to do is give you a small retrospective on Insomniac's Spider-Man series 1, Miles Morales, and then we are going to do a review of the second. So with that, our icebreaker question today is Spider-Man themed. I'd love to know, maybe starting with Luke, because I know you're a big Spidey fan. Your cat is named after the series. Tell us, what is your history with non-Insomniac Spider-Man games, and what are your faves within that?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I love Spider-Man. Claire and I have a cat named MJ. Big fan. I love the movies. I love the games. I love everything. I think my first introduction to Spider-Man in the game space was the Neversoft game on PS1. Video listeners, you can see my copy up there on the shelf. But that
you just
was the
reacquired that, right?
Yeah, I rebought it at a PAX last few years. I think it was last year's PAX West. But I love Spider-Man, and it's one of my favorite series. It was my first introduction to web swinging in a video game. And while I don't think that game compares to modern entries, it was still very fun for the time. It was my first encounter of like stealth in a video game. You get to crawl on the ceiling and you like view Spider-Man from top down, which was really trippy in a 3D space. You fight Venom in that game, which will come into convo later. But there's a lot of things that were like set up in that game that I think came to fruition in the Insomniac games. So that one definitely comes to mind. And then other than that, I remember like I didn't play Shattered Dimensions, but it looked kind of cool. I remember like playing as Spider-Man in different like fighting games, unlocking Spider-Man and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, weird stuff like that, where like he's been around, but not to this extent and this quality, I would say.
What was that 3D arena fighter that had Spider-Man in it? Was it Marvel's The Imperfects?
I can't think of an arena fighter, but there was the beat 'em up, Ultimate Oh gosh,
Marvel's Ultimate Alliance.
Ultimate Alliance. There we go. Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember playing a lot of Spider-Man in that, and it was cool because you could have weird combinations of Marvel characters interacting together.
And the game I'm referring to is Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects. If you remember that one.
What generation was that? Yeah,
that's
I
a
don't either.
PS2 Xbox game where essentially it's a fighting game, but I believe it's like a 3D sort of arena fighter, a lot like the anime games that Joseph loves, where you'll play as characters like Wolverine, Venom, Iron Man, Spider-Man, etc. You're shaking your head, Joseph. I should give you a chance to defend yourself and then tell us about your Spider-Man journey.
Yeah, I mean, the anime arena fighter epidemic is like a whole other conversation that needs to be stopped. But Spider-Man history, Spider-Man 2 on the PS2 is probably one of my favorite games of all time, just period. It was like the perfect representation of Spider-Man and the same Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and Spider-Man as I knew him as a hero. So I just absolutely love that franchise up until like we got the Insomniac 2018. I never thought that we would get a better representation of that. So like that's like my near and dear video gaming memory. I also played Spider-Man 1, like the Neversoft one. That was fun. But it was just fun. It wasn't magical like Spider-Man 2 was. And then I also played Spider-Man Ultimate Spider-Man for the GameCube. I still have it back there. And that game was just absolutely bonkers. You're playing as Venom and they're instructing you. They have like a heal mechanic where you eat people to get your health back. Good. And the way they demonstrate that to you is there's like, oh yeah, there's a little kid with a balloon over there and go eat him. And that's how they introduce the mechanic to you, which is absolutely crazy.
Love it. That's hilarious.
That's so good. That's a game that I regret not playing is Ultimate Spider-Man and then Shattered Dimension. Because those just seemed like dope games back in like the Xbox PS2 generation. And then I think Beanox kept making them into the 360. And they became lesser quality over time. Like Web Shadows, my understanding is that game was a little bit rushed, and so the quality wasn't great. But yeah,
I think
much
Shattered
like
Dimensions was 360 PS3. I could be wrong. I think it was like early generation, but I didn't play Ultimate either. That one sounds interesting. I also didn't shout out, and Jacob, you might highlight this one, but the Sam Raimi games based on the movies, like Spider-Man 2, I remember being huge for me at the time, and I didn't mention that one either.
Yeah, I mean, the Spider-Man 2 movie game is like my foray into Spider-Man games. I didn't play the Neversoft games back on the PlayStation because I didn't have a PlayStation 1, so I never touched it. But yeah, that Spider-Man movie game was so good, and it was, I think, probably the best movie tie-in game that's been done. Someone in the comments maybe can correct us and throw out some other movie tie-in games that were great. We had an episode about licensed games where we talked a little bit about good licensed games, but as far as like based on movie, where it follows a lot of what the movie does, that is top tier for me. And even though at the end, they're basically like, hey, spoilers for Spider-Man 2 on the Xbox, they basically say like, go do a bunch of side missions and help people and fight crime and get 50,000 coins. And I think at the end, Peter Parker's just like, hey, thanks, like faces a camera and goes, thanks for playing my game. And that's your reward for it. So,
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's quite silly. You can go watch it on YouTube, I'm sure. But hey, this is not a show about Spider-Man 2. This is a show about Insomniac's Spider-Man games. So I'd love to start with the fact that I'm the only human alive who has been playing Spider-Man 1 Remastered for the first time in 2023. And I have to say, this game's really dope, and I don't know why I waited 5 years to play it.
Sleep at the wheel.
I'm very impressed. One question to kick it off for your discussion. Did you avoid spoilers? Did you stay pretty media blackout on this one?
I stayed incredibly media blackout on this. Where
that's very impressive.
I know. I'm gonna stay spoiler light on Spider-Man 1 just because I'm only about, I think, 60-ish% of the way through it. But okay. I think on the story I'm actually quite far. Like if I beat it in the next 2 or 3 hours, I think I wouldn't be surprised. But just seeing what is happening with Octavius, I'm just like, oh, I know exactly where this is going, and it makes me so sad because Octavius in this game is like my dad, and he's about to break my heart. And I think everyone around me is about to, essentially break my heart. I mean, the the Invisible Man. His name is Lee. What is his first name?
Martin Lee.
Martin Lee. Martin Lee sort of broke my heart because he's a man that like runs an orphanage, or not an orphanage, but a shelter, and then also is a crime boss. So yeah, Spider-Man 1 Remastered is just about breaking my heart with, men who are around Peter that are supposed to be good influences, and oops, they're villains, or oops, they become villains. Luke, you're a huge fan of this game, right?
Oh yeah, I adore it. It was my game of the year in 2018 by far, and that speaks highly because 2018 was a pretty wild year for game releases. But yeah, I think that game just set the tone. I'm so excited that you're playing it, honestly. I'm curious about your kind of overall thoughts on the story and the open world design of the game, because I know at the time I really enjoyed the story, but a lot of folks in kind of the comic book space I know were a little critical of the story and felt like it was kind of, to use a phrase you've used to describe games, a paint by numbers comic book story, and that you see those plot beats coming. But for me, the heart of the character performances and just like the overall vibe and pacing of the story really worked for me, even if maybe I saw big reveals coming a long time in advance.
It must be really hard if you're in Insomniac shoes to make something new out of a beloved franchise, because I'm sure both Marvel and Disney are breathing down your neck the entire time and essentially like setting out guardrails to say, this is what Peter Parker and Spider-Man need to be, and you really can't like draw that far outside the lines. I think the best example when I think of superhero games is, and sorry, I'm going to be like, give you the easiest example, but I think the Arkham games do a really great job where the side missions, especially, maybe the core story. Actually, some of the core story stuff is pretty wild with the stuff that happens with Joker throughout. They got to do a lot of cool stuff there, but even the side missions I found introduce you to characters that are like side characters that you may not like. Hey, Calendar Man, do you remember Calendar Man? Because we do, and we're going to have a great side mission about it. But I haven't quite seen that, and that's what surprised me about Spider-Man 1 is there aren't a lot of villains in it. And I'm sure they'll fix that in the next games, but they have really limited it to, like, at least as far as I've gone, Invisible Man or
Mr. Negative.
Mr. Negative, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Negative, Norman Osborn, Octavius, and like Shocker, and that's truly like the only villains they've had so far, and they've managed to, keep me hooked for probably at least 10 hours at this point.
I'm like teetering because there's like things I could say to that, but I don't want to I want you to enjoy the rest of the game that you have left. But
I will ask you a question, and it's based on where I am in the game. I have just gotten to the essentially Grand Central Station in the city, and I'm just using MJ and Spider-Man in a great combination of ways to like take out baddies and save the day. Based on your memory, how much more do I have, you think?
Maybe like a third.
Okay.
I would
still
say.
have a third.
But like, Spider-Man's kind of an interesting game because that was the first game in a long time I remember staying up late, doing the side quests, like 100%ing districts like as I went. So I think I played for a lot longer than I probably needed to, because I think you could probably beat the story mainline in 15 hours, give or take. So I'd probably say you have like maybe 4 hours, 5 hours. Yeah, give or take. What do you think, Joseph?
Not gonna lie, I have no clue.
I don't remember exactly
of what this
That's
section
fair.
He's talking about is.
I just remember when you get to MJ that's like relatively late game-ish. Okay. So I think
one complaint.
Yeah,
stealth is garbage in this game. I think just stealth in non-stealth games is sort of garbage, but
that was the number one complaint, I think, from Spider-Man 2018, for sure.
Yeah, you're hitting on all the review docs I remember at the time of like the villain, the lack of villain kind of was a conversation topic. What did you think about the MJ stuff? Because that was definitely a hotly debated thing on the internet at the time.
as far as how she was portrayed, how you play her, or
people just
the
hated
playable
her playable
sections.
sections. Yeah,
I was not a fan because again, like MJ has no like. I think MJ as a character in this game is great because she gives it back to Peter, and I think it's Laura Bailey that voices MJ. Fantastic like performance from Laura Bailey here. Surprise, Laura Bailey's good at doing voice things. But yeah, I think the Miles sections and the MJ sections are just not fun to play. I essentially get to them and I'm like, cool, how do I finish this as quickly as possible so I can return to playing Spider-Man, which I love and is fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm glad those sections are only 5 minutes-ish each time.
I'm not sure if Jacob, because Jacob, just for the record, your video is on a delay for me, so I don't know exactly what you're looking at. But I was trying to tie my little hoodie strings. It was not working, and I saw you make a face, but I don't know if that was a face you were making 10 minutes ago. So anyways, to kind of add on to what you were saying about 2018 and kind of to give my initial thoughts on 2018, Spider-Man 2018 was like immediately one of my favorite games of all time. I love Spider-Man. I love like swinging around the city, and I 100% think that Spider-Man 2 is like the best that Insomniac or anybody has ever made a comic book character feel, or any IP that you're familiar with feel. And it was just like immediately a 10 in terms of like that embodiment of that character. It wasn't a 10 in terms of everything, because like Jacob is saying, like I had some issues with the stealth, some parts. You know, I say this and I'll say this a million times. Whenever I'm playing as a specific character that everybody knows, like, hey, we're making this game so you can be this character. When they take me away from that experience, I feel like it's kind of like, oh, what are we doing? Like, I love MJ. I love that she's a part of the story. I love that they try to incorporate Miles into Spider-Man 2018. But it's like, I want to play as Spider-Man as long as possible. So when you force me through these like weird, you know, side missions that don't really have fully fleshed out mechanics, you're kind of just like, oh, okay, I guess. And to go back to like the story beats, I am one who's like, okay, I know how the Spider-Man story goes. I will say that from my memory, I don't think there was much from Spider-Man 2018 that surprised me. I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of how it's going to go. And every time I had a theory about like, oh, maybe they'll do this, it was like, oh no, they'll probably, they kind of just do the safe thing, which is totally fine with me. I don't really play it to be emotionally charged. Like I've seen a billion Spider-Man stories over the years, whether it's the movies or the, the cartoons that I've watched or whatever. So it's like, I get it. I know who Spider-Man is. I don't expect his plot to really move me that much, but Spider-Man 2018 still just like the perfect combination of all those things, of all the nostalgic like story beats that I remember from over the years, of the perfect combos. I think this has one of the best like casual action combo gameplay systems, where it's not quite as advanced as like a Devil May Cry or something like that, but the way you can fluidly move from one attack to webbing somebody on the wall to swinging and just like get like a 100+ hit combo without, you know, with I won't say ease, but like pretty much ease. All that stuff is incredible, right? So I think they really nailed it. Like for this being their first attempt, they really, really nailed it. And all the notes that I have are mostly unrelated to Spider-Man and how that character plays. So
I think I'm almost to where I still think Arkham is better from like a actual punching combat like system, but all the things you can do around the punching for Spider-Man like makes it equivalent. They're same but different, or I like them just as much but for different reasons. I guess I just have like one surprise because I did stay in media blackout, and it brings me to the next section that we're going to play. I was shocked that Miles Morales was in this game. Like I did not realize that even as like as a character in the world that we were going to get Miles, and that spoilers, Miles gets his like Uncle Ben moment in this game. I was shocked because they didn't really put it in the media with respect to like the launch trailers and whatnot.
I remember getting to that moment, and it felt so cool to be surprised by that. And this is long before we even knew that there was going to be a sequel. This is long before we even knew Miles would be the star of that sequel, and they were setting up this like broader expanded universe. But like, such a fun moment, such a cool nod to, and at the time I think Spider-Verse hadn't come out yet. Like, it was like that next month or two later after the game's release. So as a comic book fan, I was like, oh my god, they're doing Miles. And then when Spider-Verse came out, it was like that character became like more of a household pop culture name, which was really dope.
That leads me to the next section of what I want to talk about, and that is Spider-Man Miles Morales, which came out a few years between Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2. I've not touched it yet. Luke, I know you have played it. Joseph, you've played it too, right?
Absolutely. Come on, man.
Okay.
I've played everything. I'm a Spider-Man video game super fan.
Okay, so do me a favor. My understanding with this one is that it is smaller in scope, but the world they create is great, and it's at Christmas. Your Mariah Carey shirt also plays here, Luke. But how would you sell this game to me that I need to continue my Spider-Man playthrough and play it immediately after Spider-Man 1?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that although it is like a smaller experience, I feel like it feels completely fresh. And I don't know if that's me saying that as somebody who played it, coming 2 to 3 days or 2 to 3 years off of like Spider-Man 2018. And sorry, like my washing machine is doing something crazy right now. And I'm like, is this about to explode?
Brother, you're having a rough go
check
today.
it out. I mean, honestly,
It's just
that. But anyways,
it'll be okay. We can fix a lot in post.
But like, the primary thing is like, it just feels so fresh because they do really kind of lean into Miles being like a black guy, being in the Bronx, being like having that Latin heritage, and like from the music to the way things are how people dress to the way that the shots are lit. Like, it feels almost like a completely different experience. And although I think the core gameplay is mostly the same, Miles does have like a new suite of powers, which is really cool. But like, for the most part, I'm like, yo, dude, this feels like, hey, we're getting a new movie. It's just like, hey, you saw James Bond do this one thing with this one villain. That was great. But then you have like this other villain who has his own different vibe. And it just feels like it's more James Bond, but it feels completely fresh. So, yeah, I'd say 100%. If it's not just for the Miles soundtrack, the Miles theme song, amazing. One of the best Spider-Man theme songs I can remember.
Does it draw inspiration from, like, because I believe he's also Puerto Rican. Keep me honest there. Is it because the music reminds you of like Puerto Rican music? Is it because it relies on hip hop, sort of like the Spider-Verse movies? What makes it so good?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. For me personally, it's more of the hip hop. You hear a lot more drums, like basses, stuff like it is very much Spider-Verse, like in a different way. I think Spider-Verse plays around with like that kind of like DJing scratch glitch effect, because that kind of is what the movie plays on. But Miles is essentially kind of that same hip hoppy vibe without like the record scratches and stuff in between.
Is it the same size city as the first, or is it just a section of the city?
Just a section.
Just a section? Luke, what are your thoughts on it?
It's been a few years. Maybe I'm misremembering. Joseph, is it the same? I thought it was a small chunk. I feel like it's a small chunk.
I'll tell you this. My hot take on the Spider-Man series, the whole controversy / non-controversy about the map size, it doesn't matter to me, because it all feels like the same size map. I don't care if it's twice the size, half the size. You're swinging so fast around the city that it's like, how would I? Okay, I'm swinging for 3 extra minutes. It doesn't really matter. It's like, it feels like all the same size to me.
Yeah, whatever it wasn't an issue for me at the time. I think a great thing about Miles is how like concise it is. It is an 8 to 10 hour game. It was the first game I played on PS5 when I got my PS5 on launch day, so that was a big moment. I think the game's dope. Like Joseph touched on, all the music, the cultural touchstones, the representation, I think is all really cool. I think Miles does some really great things with side quests and side characters in terms of narrative pacing that I think honestly surpasses 2018 for me, and I think it leads into what Spider-Man 2 this year has become. but just making like a really great sense of community, and you get to know Tio, the bodega owner, and his cat, who is named Spider-Man, and little cute, wholesome things like that are just like make you feel connected to the world in a meaningful way. So I think the game does a really great job with that. There are some fun nods to different characters in the comic book universe, and it unlike some like spin-off games, I feel like this game really matters. Like it feels like a true sequel, even if it is a kind of, in terms of gameplay evolution, a 1.5 versus a 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to jump on what you said.
Quality 1.5 being like 1.5 sequel. Yeah.
I think it's like mandatory. Like I don't think this does not feel like skippable content to me.
Especially
you need to
off
play
of playing 2 without getting into it. Like
right.
Miles and his story is a huge part of that game.
Right, 100%.
For Miles, my question is, and again, keeping it spoiler light, and I don't know how well you know the comics of Miles Morales, because I believe he's a character that's like relatively new, like 10 to 15 years old at most. Is it like Batman Beyond where he has his own set of villains, or does he share a lot of the villains that Peter Parker would have?
Without getting into spoilers, how do I answer that question?
That's why Joseph's shaking his head. He's like, says no spoilers, and then asks the question that's spoiler filled.
It touches in both ways, I would say. There's storylines that are specific to Miles in the game. There are storylines that are specific to both Spider-Man characters. Take that how you will, without getting into specifics.
So, to add on to that, what I'll say, I'm shaking my head because I'm thinking of Miles Morales, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be 100% honest.
Keep it real.
The characters, for the main characters that they introduced in Miles Morales, I'm like, who are these people? Who are you? But going into Spider-Man 2, obviously Kraven and Venom are like on the cover, but there are some characters that Spider-Man runs into where I'm like, who are you? So I think we're just kind of getting at the bottom of the grab bag. I think for pop culture, everybody just knows the main Spider-Man villains. I don't know if it's like a detriment to Miles Morales, but so far, yeah, Luke, they interact with everybody the same. But definitely when they introduce Miles, we're really going into the closet to figure out who we're bringing out to fight this guy is all I'll say.
I will say, though, to that point, and comic book fans will know who I'm referencing, there's a main character in Miles that they use that is a fun and unique twist on what that character previously is in Spider-Man. So, Insomniac isn't afraid to kind of shake up the universe and kind of do their own twist on stuff when it makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I say they do all the characters they show justice. I'm just saying, as a guy who does not read the comics at all,
that's fair.
They're all new to me. They're all new to me.
Yeah,
I love it.
For sure.
Okay, well, I think those are kind of the thoughts that I need to know about Miles Morales. So, y'all have both played Spider-Man 2. I believe you both have beat it. And so, again, I'd love to know, high level, Luke, you're ready to jump out your skin. So I want to know from your perspective, gush about Spider-Man 2 for us, baby.
Let's do it. And just to give a quick plug, I would point listeners, if you want a very spoiler-filled discussion of Spider-Man 2, you can check out the latest episode of LukeWarmGames where Kyle Stevenson and I just go full spoilers, chat about all our favorite moments from the game. So
we'll link
these
it
are
in the
nice,
show
like
notes.
companion pods. But yeah, Spider-Man 2 is incredible. I absolutely loved it. This was the first game in a long time where I was like, I am taking launch day and I am playing this game. Like, clear my schedule. Claire, I'm sorry. I'll see you in 48 hours. But it's been really delightful. I platinumed the game. I beat it in a little under a week. I played a lot, and I absolutely loved every second of it. I think Insomniac did a great job elevating the gameplay systems that made Spider-Man and Miles Morales so good. They added new things like the web suit to make traversal even more interesting and cool. And I think the story in this one is really elevated for me. I think they go in unexpected directions. They introduce new characters. I think Kraven in particular on the villain side really stands out to me as an interesting character that opens up a lot of possibility within the story. Yeah, I had a blast with this one. I also think the side quest pacing is incredibly well done. I think they did a really nice job of condensing what worked well in the first two Spider-Man games and, stripped away the tedious side quests and really just got down to the meat of what made that game fun in the best way possible.
Joseph?
I'll start this off by saying I also did a spoiler cast on Player Pod.
Let's
I am
go.
almost certain that we talk about separate stuff in Luke and I's
cool.
podcast, because me and Arson are talking about random suits and clowning for several minutes of that podcast. So I think both would be a great listen. But
Awesome.
We'll play a little good cop, bad cop here. I guess to
Spider
start
Cop?
off first.
Spider Cop.
We'll play Spider Cop here. To start off, I'll say that I did love Spider-Man 2. I finished it in 3-4 days. Got the platinum and everything. It was fantastic. What I will say is, I am not as impressed with Spider-Man 2 as a feat of Insomniac. In a weird, I am, and then I'm not. I will say that in the way of PlayStation has really spoiled us in terms of how we perceive their sequels. When we go from Last of Us Part 1 to Last of Us Part 2, when we go from Horizon Zero Dawn to Horizon Forbidden West, there was such a big gap between those games that I felt oh man, we are pushing the technology of whatever new console that we're seeing these experiences on, or we started with the PS4 and now we're ending with the PS4, and this is a completely new experience. Spider-Man 2, for me personally, doesn't really feel like a new experience. And I think that's fine, because I played Miles Morales, 2 years ago. I played 2018, 2 years before that. And even though I'm being kind of critical there, what I like about it is Insomniac is bringing back what people have been asking for over a decade, right? We want shorter games. But we want more of them, and we want them at a pretty consistent quality, right? Back when we got Mass Effect 1 through 3 within the span of 5 to 6 years.
Wild.
Sure, Mass Effect 1 to 2 wasn't the most innovative, groundbreaking change, but we got a lot of awesome story. We got a lot of new mechanics in there, and most importantly, we got more Mass Effect, which is what everybody wanted, right? So I think we're in a very similar situation in Spider-Man 2. Playing it, I am not wow, I can't believe I'm doing this, because I literally did this 2 years ago for the most part. I don't think the story was as transformative as Last of Us Part 2 versus Last of Us Part 1, but I really, really enjoy Spider-Man. And if I had the choice of getting one transformative Spider-Man in 3 years versus the other two that I've gotten, I would take these two, hands down every single time pretty much. So yeah, I think it's still the same core gameplay that you pretty much see in 2018 in Miles Morales, with a few flares and additions, but I love that. I don't know what improvements I could ask for stuff like that. So yes, I love it, but I don't think it is the most impressive thing in this sea of games this year. So that's just kind of, I don't know if that's a hot take, but
I think this year's pretty stacked, so I don't think it's a hot take, and I think there's a ton of games out there for everybody this year in a variety of ways. And I'll just add to, I don't disagree with what you're saying about the story, Joseph. It doesn't stand with A Last of Us Part 2 or my favorite game ever in storytelling, but I think for a Spider-Man game, I went in expecting a safe narrative, and I think it was elevated from that, and they did play with my expectations in some interesting ways that I definitely appreciated. But yeah, it's such a fun game. I keep saying it because it's true, but this type of game is why I love video games. Polished open world action games with incredible pacing, compelling story, and something you just don't want to put down, that really just engages you right from the jump.
I think that's what I love most. Go ahead, Joseph.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's
Jacob.
what I love most about Insomniac is they make the most video games that you could ask for
in the best way.
And that's not a negative thing.
No.
I think Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was one of my favorite games when it came out, just because it was exactly what I wanted out of a Ratchet and Clank game that I've been playing since the PlayStation 2. But then they would throw in things like the dual protagonists that we sort of get in Spider-Man 2, as well as some like crazy rift tech that I think parts of that may end up here if I'm keeping things spoiler light.
I won't say how, but it's very cool.
I hear there's a lot of Is there a lot of dreams in this game? It sounds like there's a lot of dream states in this game.
Where are you coming up with these? Where are you getting this information from? Where are you getting your intel from, Jacob?
Seeing those Twitter video clips, maybe or something.
Maybe I'm hearing podcasters talk about how they feel like this Spider-Man 2 has a little bit shared DNA with Alan Wake 2 from just like the way
that's
they.
An interesting comparison. I thought you were just making like Ratchet and Clank to Spider-Man, which I think that's clear because definitely members of the team they shared some tech and some ideas and thoughts. So that's definitely true.
Well, Jacob, I'll say. Don't worry about all that, all right? Don't worry about what other people are saying right now, because I think based off of what you're saying, you'll be surprised.
Okay.
I kind of want you to go on media blackout for Spider-Man 2, and then when you get to that and however amount of time, it'll be interesting. But I'm also curious how like playing everything like kind of close together for you will influence your opinion. If that will be like if in the end you'll be like, oh, that was pretty repetitive, or if you'll be like just like high on Spider-Man and be injecting into your veins kind of
I've done this a few times in my life where I played all of the Metal Gear Solid games from 1 to 4 in a row.
Oh, cool.
Which was super cool. Joseph shaking his head.
Seems like a lot. That's all I'm...
That's a series I've never jumped into either.
Same.
So that would be...
It was a lot.
That collection just came out?
The thing I'm going to do, I think, is play 1 in Miles Morales and then take a small break and maybe play 1 or 2 games.
I think that makes sense.
Before the end of the year, I think I will play Spider-Man 2 just because, like, I'm really interested in it.
Miles would be a fun one to play over the holidays just because of that Christmas setting. And it's a good vibe.
100%. Yeah.
It gives me Hawkeye vibes for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How did we feel about the major villains that are in it? I know that there's probably more below the surface, but in the marketing, we saw Venom, we saw Kraven, we saw Sandman. So, speaking about those villains, how do we feel about portrayals of those villains?
Ultimately, I really liked where... I disliked where Kraven started, and I really liked where Kraven ended, because... Not a super spoiler, but he doesn't appear as much as I want him to in the early parts of the game. And on the reverse side, I more have really, really liked where Venom started. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is cool where he ended. So I was kind of the flip on these two characters. But overall, I like them. I don't think that either of them really did anything more notable than the other Spider-Man villains, because I also really like the portrayal of all of the ones in 2018 and Miles Morales as well. But I will say one of the villains have one of my favorite moments, almost period, in a game of recent memory. Ooh. I won't kind of spoil it, but I was like, oh yeah, this is
what you're talking about.
This is the good stuff right here.
I think we were DMing about that specific moment as soon as I finished the game. So yeah, I think I mostly align with you, Joseph. My caveat, I think, is that I was really ready to not like Venom in this game, because I think that's a storyline that, whether it's the Sam Raimi movies or in different comic adaptations, it's like, we've seen Venom. It's a known quantity. Like, we've seen it, but I think the way they do it in this game over time becomes really interesting, and I think it ends up in a relatively predictable place, but like the journey, like you were saying, I thought was pretty darn compelling, and it wasn't just the Peter's bad now and mean. That's like, that's not like a key part of it. There's a lot more happening, which I was pleased to see. And then on Kraven, I think I was really impressed by... I'm treading thin lines in terms of getting into spoilers here, but for those that have played it, I think Kraven's storyline does a really nice job opening up other avenues for other villains in the universe, and like how Spider-Man has to interact with those characters in the game, I think is really cool. And then I think how, to your earlier question, Jacob, about how Spider-Man villains versus Spider-Man Miles Morales, like how those villains interact, I think this game does a really cool job about making meaningful moments with Peter Parker, with Miles, with them together, any combination with different villains and whatnot throughout the story.
Sandman, and again, this is something that I believe is in the first hour.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear your opinion on it. My understanding is the set piece in the first hour involving Sandman is likened to some of the best set pieces that have ever been in PlayStation games, like God of War 3's opening hour, God of War Ragnarok's opening hour. Joseph, do you agree? Is it dope?
It's dope, but God of War, those opening set pieces for me are like literally untouchable. But it's good. Like Sandman is not my favorite villain because for whatever reason, he seems like he's always crying about something as you're fighting him. Like even in like the most recent movie.
It's a pretty sad life.
Yeah.
He's just like a sad guy. It's like, I don't want to be fighting this guy, dude. He's just sad. Like, so even with that, I was like, oh yeah, this is really cool. I will say though, I think the difference between it is up there. It is 100% up there. I would say it's right behind God of War, but God of War has moments in all of those opening sequences where I'm like, holy moly. Like, I don't want to spoil it, but like the game over sequence, for example, in Ragnarok, where you're like, wait a second, like this is game changing. Like it doesn't get close to that, but it is fun and it's sick. And it basically gets your adrenaline on 100. So then you can spend 5 hours straight exploring the city. 100%. Yeah.
I think it's on par for me personally. And I think on a technical level, they start the game with such scale. And I think in Spider-Man 2018, it doesn't ever reach the same like technical, like Sandman is like the size of buildings at the start of Spider-Man 2.
Damn.
And I just think that tech and how they're doing that combat and then how it affects the world and all that stuff, like I think it's really dope. But yeah, it's one of my favorite openings of games for sure.
How does 2018 open? I don't remember.
That's the Wilson Fisk fight, right? Which is cool.
Yeah. It's very cool.
Both games, and then I won't spoil Miles just because you haven't gotten to it yet, Jacob. But all the games have a cool opening. They're very good about getting you right into the thick of things, and I think that should be praised for sure.
Yeah, Spider-Man 1 is very much like you just go through a building and take down a bunch of dudes to get to Wilson Fisk. Which so far there haven't been that many like villain boss battles, which sort of surprises me a little bit. But that first hour,
that's why I say
great.
You still have some game left. Not to. Okay. Things are coming. I guess I'll say that. It's not a spoiler. Just say.
And I have to make sure not to Google anything else because I just Googled Yuri Spider while we were talking, and then just spoiled myself on a thing from Spider-Man 2. So media blackout from now on.
Yeah, you got to be careful now because I think now we've reached the point where like Spider-Man 2 spoilers are kind of being posted more like without
in the
care.
number one search. Yeah,
a little bit. So it's dangerous out there if you're trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
Do you
Going
like
back
to
the?
Go ahead.
Oh, really
Joseph,
quick, like the
lead
intros.
us.
I will say now that you reminded me, the intros in Spider-Man specifically, I think do scale almost exponentially with each game. Like I remember the 2018 one. That's pretty cool. Fisk, whatever. I really like the Miles, especially with the Christmas time setting. Not gonna spoil what they do, but I really like that. And then the Sandman compared to those two, like blows them out of the water. So they definitely do scale. But I will say, Sandman, once again, is kind of like who he is. You don't get a ton of character in the way you get Kraven and Venom. So he's kind of just, there to set dress for the most part and kind of add a little flavor, but it's mostly Kraven and Venom.
Okay.
And I know we were talking about this privately, Joseph, but once again, without getting into spoilers, but they are setting up a lot in this game for a future entry in the series. So I think we don't see conclusions to all of these villain stories for the most part because there are some set dressings happening. So like take that how you will. There's definitely some cool moments, but it is like, I want to see the end of this arc where it's like you're not seeing the end quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that before we move on to the last part of this.
Sure.
But before that, I do want to ask about the dual protagonist stuff, because my understanding is you can play most missions as either Spider-Man, Peter Parker, or Miles Morales. Their move sets are mostly similar, but there's some slight distinctions between them. But then there are some levels where you have to play as Miles or Peter. Is that correct? Did we like that?
I think in short, it's correct, and I thought it was pretty cool. Okay. Something we haven't touched on in this conversation is the skill tree in the game, which I think is vastly improved in this title, and I think they do a really nice job about having a skill tree for Miles, having one for Peter, and then having one where they're combined. So the combined one is more of like useful abilities for either Spider-Man, and then they get more specific on their individual ones, and I thought that was a really nice way to kind of allow players to prioritize what they wanted to unlock right off the bat.
Did you have a preference between Spider-Man?
Luke?
Sorry, you can answer, Joseph, if you want. I just wanted to jump in for that first one.
I was just going to say, in terms of preference, Miles for sure. I love Miles.
I agree. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
They're both very good, though. It's like they're both very fun. It wasn't like I have to play as Peter now, bummer. It was like I think the story of Miles compelled me more, so in those moments I just like, if I'm running around the community doing side quests, it's like, I'm Miles. That's his vibe. That's like what makes sense right now. So
the one thing I'll say about that, Luke, and I'm sure you know what I mean, there is one moment where they make you play as Spider-Man and you're like, wait, everybody hold on. What are we doing here? Like let's give me Miles, give me something else. What's happening? Which is pretty funny. I will say, according to your explanation, Jacob, I would actually not say that you could do most missions as Peter or Miles. Miles has like a lot of Miles missions. Peter has a lot of Peter missions. And then there's like a small overlap, and you can explore the city and do city missions. I mean, like,
there's a fair bit of open world stuff you could
a lot of open world, like, because the flame side mission that's Peter only.
You have to do that as Peter. Yeah.
So mostly like,
the Mysterium ones, you have to do those as Miles.
Right, yeah. So, like, for the big set piece side missions and main missions, they force you to pick who you're playing as, which is not a big deal because I think they're specifically tailored to those characters and how the story is told, which is good. So,
okay. I want to go back to the question that we left on the table a little while ago, just about the future of the Spider-Man series. Obviously, Insomniac now is working on the Wolverine game that's coming. And there have been teases in some media about what could potentially happen if there was a Spider-Man 3. So as folks who have played the entire series, I want you to sort of predict where Spider-Man 3 may go in the most spoiler-light way possible. Challenge. And then I'd love to just talk about what you want from a Wolverine game. Let's start with Spider-Man 3. If you need me to take my headphones off, I will do so. But try and keep it spoiler-light for your boy.
I think we can do our best. I think folks that are listening that have played it know what we're alluding to. Yeah. You know what I mean? Joseph, do you have thoughts?
So Insomniac has shown me that they will most likely do what you expect them to do. So anybody that finished Spider-Man 2 kind of knows where we're being set up for, especially if you finish all the side missions and stuff and you're assuming that anything left open will be resolved immediately in the next game. I think a lot of what you can expect to see in the next game is defined. The only thing I'm very curious about is, where do they go with the gameplay? Like, I really don't know. We've already had 2 Spider-Man. We've had the wingsuit. Like, how can you possibly make Spider-Man 3 as a mainline entry bigger and feel like substantially, crazier than Spider-Man 2? I have no clue. I have zero idea. Like, maybe... No, I just don't know. I was going to say, like, maybe add, like, some cool Spider-Man, like, Spidey sense bullet time thing. I don't know. I really don't know what they're going to do, but I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I would agree. It's interesting to think about gameplay for a future game because To your earlier point, Jacob, when you mentioned your qualms with the stealth in the first game, I think they did a really good job of making stealth a much more viable option in Spider-Man 2.
Cool.
And so, I just don't have gameplay critiques as much in Spider-Man 2 as I did with 1. I think they've really elevated it to, the traversal is the best it's ever been. The combat is the best it's ever been. These systems are working really, really well. So I think the big thing in Spider-Man 3 is tying up those loose ends with those different villain storylines that they've set up to this point and those characters they've kind of made us fall in love with over these 3 games. One thing I will say, I think without getting into specifics, I think there's some expanded Spider-Man / Marvel Universe stuff that they could play with. I know Brian Entahar mentioned on the Kind of Funny spoiler casts, he's the creative director of the game. He said something along the lines of, if this is our Infinity War, next is Endgame. So I think the scale can be ratcheted up. The characters we're pulling in can be ratcheted up. The places we're going can kind of just they're going to go crazy with it. I think to an extent they already did with this game. So I'm excited to see what turning it up to 11 I think looks like for Insomniac.
Okay, that's Spider-Man 3. The Wolverine game is the other thing I need to touch on. Luke is like, man, just give me Wolverine Origins and Origins Wolverine and I'll be in heaven. But what do you want to see from that?
I think I'm just excited to see them tell a really dark story, because I think Spider-Man 2 went far darker and more mature themes than I ever thought Insomniac would do. And then I imagine that'll be an M-rated game, so I'm really just interested to see how far Insomniac will take it, and I want to see their technical prowess, their gameplay abilities. What does a mature based Insomniac game look like? And I think that'll be something really special.
Yeah, because I think the only M-rated game they've ever done is Resistance, and I think that was a pretty tame rated M game.
Is that
in my
even
opinion.
M? I think that might be T as
That was
well.
T.
I'm gonna look this up, but I feel
I'm just curious. But
Resistance 2 was M.
Okay.
Resistance 3, I'll check, but at least one game in the series was rated M.
Fair enough.
But to your point, very much
not their general bag, but so that I think that's what I'm most excited about. I also think Wolverine is a far less explored video game character. We had the movie tie-in game, he pops up a little bit here and there in Ultimate Alliance and that sort of thing, but we haven't had a true narrative original Wolverine game. So I'm excited just for a new thing, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I'm not necessarily always the most excited about the story. I do really, really hope it goes dark. But I know Insomniac is at the behest of Marvel, and they have to be on whatever leash Marvel gives them. So I'm okay, if the story is dark and cool, I'm very into that. If it doesn't get there, I'm not going to blame Insomniac for that. But what I'm really looking forward to seeing is what does the gameplay feel like? Because I think Insomniac struck gold with Spider-Man, and I don't know how they did it, but they were able to make such perfect gameplay that needed such few tweaks in 2018 that they were able to easily churn out sequels and greater experiences just based off of that core mechanic. And I think if they wanted to, they could ride that core mechanic for another 5 years or so, because it's that good. If they're able to do that same thing with Wolverine, we're going to be eating so well. We will likely have 3 Wolverine games over the span of 6 years. I was talking with Arsene about if they could nail the Wolverine gameplay and then maybe give us a Hulk gameplay. Ooh. And have us Wolverine versus Hulk. Oh my God, I would lose my mind. So I'm very excited to see. Insomniac are, in my opinion, a part of the gameplay god pantheon. They nail it with Ratchet, they nail it with Spider-Man. I think they can nail it with Wolverine. So I'm very excited to see if it delivers.
Yeah. I'm curious to see kind of what the game design of a Wolverine game will look like too. Is it an open world game? Is it more linear? It could go either way.
That's true. Yeah, that's
just seeing how they approach it, I think will be cool.
Sometimes I marvel at the amount of game that Insomniac is able to turn out, at the quality level they're able to turn out. So if y'all said, hey, Marvel's Wolverine is a 12-hour linear experience where the gameplay is just super tight and the story goes places,
That
I'm
sounds
happy
great.
with that.
Yeah,
that sounds
totally.
excellent. Please do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Any final thoughts about Spider-Man, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, or Marvel's Wolverine before we end?
They're all good games. Even Wolverine, I played it. It was good.
Very good games. I mentioned, I think, on a podcast, our first podcast, when we talked about our game of the year, and I said that Tears of the Kingdom was like slam dunk, my game of the year, immovable, nothing's touching it. And then I played this game, and while I think for Tears of the Kingdom is doing a lot of innovative things, Spider-Man just hit on like a core thing that I needed in this moment, and it was just such a blast to play. So it catapulted to my game of the year currently. So
wow.
High praise from me, but a very, very fun game. Very, very fun series. If you haven't touched it, like Jacob, I highly recommend it. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Even if you're not the biggest comic book fan, I think there's a lot to love.
All right, well, hey, those are our thoughts about Insomniac Spider-Man series and the future of Insomniac and comic book games. So we're going to set our status to away for this week. So in the meantime, I'd love for you to do three things, actually. Follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos. We're sharing updates about the show there. Send the podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And if you liked our discussion about the series, give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. On Apple Podcasts, it helps.
Only 5-star.
Only 5 stars. I thought, Joseph, you were saying stop, don't give us reviews when you were doing that, but 5 only.
10 stars.
10 stars, which means 5 on Apple Podcasts and 5 on Spotify. For Spotify, you need to listen to the show for 30 seconds, but if you love us, maybe you'll do that for us. Let's do a thing where we share where we're at on other places. Joseph, where are you at other places?
I am on. I was like, what does this question mean? I'm totally zoning out.
I'm plugging on your own stuff.
Where
bro.
am I?
Can't pause. YouTube.com. YouTube.com/can't pause and playerplayerpod. Playerplayerpod.com.
Love it, Luke.
You can find me. I'm at LukeWarmLewis on all the socials, and you can find me over on the Lukewarm Games podcast every other week.
Love it. And you can find me on the Left Behind Game Club. We are semi-regular. When this comes out, we're coming out with a Final Fantasy 16 two-parter, a big old spoiler cast. So prepare yourselves for that. And you can find me on twitter.com at Jacob McCourt, JACOBMCCOURT. That's our show. So remember, friends, with great power comes great responsibility. Hey, it's me again. Thanks so much for listening to our episode 9 of Crossplay Conversations. If you like the show, do me a couple favors. Follow us on your podcasting platform of choice or on YouTube, and you can give the podcast a 5-star review if you love this episode. More Left Behind Game Club coming soon. We'll see you then.